Hi, everyone. I want to welcome you to our Health Professions Week 2021 Health Talk with one of my dear friends and one of our partners, Petros Manassi from Kaplan. Petros is the Senior Director of Pre-Health Programs at Kaplan, and he has some wonderful advice that he wants to share with you today about really kind of prepping for your test prep in the time of COVID. So Petros, I want to welcome you. Again, my name is Mandy. You and I have been friends for a long time. So I feel like we're just going to have a really great conversation today. And so I just want to say thank you for spending a little bit of time with us and welcome.
And thanks for having me. Thanks for having us. We're looking forward to the next couple minutes talking about all the important things related to the admissions process and really how these exams that everybody's going to have to take are going to fit into it, and even more so kind of in a weird second year of everything that's going on with the pandemic and how those processes have been affected. So thanks for having me and having us, and let's dive in. And
all right. Let's do this. Okay, so you brought it up. So it's already a stressful time for pre-health students and students that are kind of on this track and in this journey. How has COVID really affected students in their preparation for taking these really important entrance exams?
In the early days of COVID, it was a very direct effect because we had tests being canceled and tests being postponed, and then registration completely shutting down, and tests actually, the MCAT went through, I think the most dramatic of the changes in that they actually shortened the exam and offered it 3 times each day so that they could get everybody tested, right? So very, very kind of chaotic period of time. And then this past year, we saw some return to normalcy as far as like the length of the exam, but again, more accommodations to accommodate social distancing and making sure that we could get everybody could get tested, et cetera, et cetera. But we're starting to see really the return to normal now. Specifically, we're starting to see the tests being administered when they would normally be administered, with the amount of time that they would normally be administered under. So kind of things have gotten back to normal because, as we've gone through this process the last now year and a half or so, we've learned how to work with it, right? We've learned how to live within this environment. So yes, there's been an effect. I think the bigger effect has been with the continued uncertainty that sometimes lives depending on kind of geographic localities, where you are, the rules may be different. So that's definitely been something that has come up from time to time. But I think the important mindset that a student needs to go through is to really kind of keep pushing forward, right? So keep moving forward, especially with the prerequisite classes. I know that's also been an area that has affected a lot of students because maybe they haven't been able to take the prereq courses, or the prereq courses themselves were disrupted. So maybe there's a little bit more catch-up work that has to be done to kind of go back and say, okay, yeah, I was learning that stuff, but I was learning that stuff during a pretty chaotic time, et cetera, et cetera. So, the good news is it's very transparent as far as what can be tested and what is tested and what is expected of a student, regardless if you're taking the MCAT, the DAT, the GRE, whatever the test may be. That information is out there. So the more informed you can be as a student, the more informed you can be as a test taker, the better off you're going to be in the long run, regardless of the situation we are in or not. I mean, that's just kind of a general bit of advice that I give to all my students. I've been teaching this stuff for the last 20 years or so. So I can definitely say, I've seen all sorts of things and hadn't seen this before. And I wasn't expecting this to ever happen as far as the pandemic. So.
Right. Okay, so you touched on something and I want to follow up on that. So it's already, preparing for these exams, you're already getting kind of a weird built schedule where you've got to, go through this material to prep, but then you've got to play catch up, right? You mentioned prereqs and maybe feeling like, that first exposure to these things, maybe you didn't quite get it or it was a stressful time. How does a student really prepare and catch up at the same time?
So it's about prioritization. So I'll kind of walk us through kind of how to prioritize things. So the first thing you have to do when preparing for an exam, whether we're in the situation that we've been in or not, is to really kind of know where your strengths and where your opportunities are. And that's an important step regardless. But in these times, it's an even more important step. And the reason for that is if you are going to need to play catch up, you want to make sure that you are not spending time studying material that you're not going to be held accountable for on the exam. It's so easy to go down the rabbit hole and say, well, I'm going to, I've got this fear of missing out. I want to learn all these things and, start to get overly fixated on one topic area or one type of question or one, strategy, whatever it may be. And then, your time is on a little bit more of a crunch. So if you're able to prioritize things and say, okay, let me actually make sure that what I'm studying, there's going to be a direct reward for that on the exam. That's how you manage the catch-up work, because the catch-up is going to have to be there, but at the same time, do the work that you need to absolutely be doing to get yourself to the place that you want to get to.
Absolutely. And not to spend time studying the stuff you already know, to know exactly where you need to be. Okay. So if being proactive is that key to exam prep, what can students do right now to really feel ready on test day?
So first things first, know when you're going to be taking the exam. So I think that's like step number 1 or step 0, right? Know when you are planning on taking this exam. That is your target date. And then we work backwards from that. We say, okay, we're taking the exam. We're going to use a hypothetical date here, right? April 22nd or April 2022, right? That's when we're going to take the exam. Sorry. Yeah. So that's a hypothetical. We say, okay, that's when we want to test. We work backwards. We say, okay, here we are. It's November. I want to make sure that I'm mapping out my next 6 months. What vacations do I have planned? What midterms? What finals do I have built into that time?
Right. What life? Yeah. What life experience is
going on in my life that I'm going to need to make sure that I account for? All of a sudden you realize, well, what I thought was 5 or 6 months is really closer to 3.5 months worth of time. And then you go and say, okay, now I know that. Then I take some kind of diagnostic, some kind of assessment, back to your point, Mandy, as far as know what you know what you don't know. And now I can say, all right, here's what I need to be placing my focus on, and always map that against the actual blueprint of the exam, because each of these exams explicitly, publicly states what is tested, what is not tested, right? It's not a secret as far as what you're going to be held accountable for. So the earlier you're able to do those things, take those steps, the better you're going to be, and then build out your overall kind of study plan, right? So here's where my focus is going to be here. Here's where my focus is going to be this week, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's going to change along the way. I will say kind of one way to think about this is at no time during the start to finish process of preparing for any of these exams are you going to be doing the same thing, right? If you're doing the same thing each, as you go through, then that means you're not actually making progress. So the work that you're doing as far as content, that's going to change. The types of activities that you're doing are going to change. Earlier on, you're going to be spending more time reviewing content and learning how to take the tests. As you master that, then you will start to be able to incorporate more and more practice, right? Practice needs to start on day 1, but you don't want to be taking full-length exams on day 1. Aside from taking an assessment or a diagnostic, the kind of advantage that you have in this process is that you control the process, and earlier on you want to make sure that you are practicing, but practicing only the material that you're actually comfortable with. And if you're not comfortable with something, then go and learn that material, then practice with that to figure out what you need to practice next. And so over time, your practice will increase, but your straight content review is going to decrease as you're moving forward. So you're always going to be kind of making adjustments along the way. And that's something that we're not used to, right? We're used to, okay, I go into a rhythm, this is how I study, and I just keep doing the same thing over and over again, week after week. So, and also part of it, just to kind of couple on that thought, you have to start training yourself to think the way the test thinks, which is different from how you've been tested as an undergrad. So the way your physics professor tested you or your chem professor tested you very different from how these exams are testing you, and really very different, especially, you know, if we look at I'm going to use the MCAT here as the example because it is the most unique of all the exams. It actually integrates the sciences with each other. I mean, you're being tested on the physical sciences in a biological context, which we don't learn chemistry and physics in a biological context. Right. So you have to train yourself on those things as well.
Yeah. Okay, so that's an interesting question then. And you mentioned at the top of this that you've been doing this for a long time, and Kaplan has been doing this for a long time. How do these exams really test students and measure their aptitude? Can you give us a little insight on that?
So it's not so much aptitude. These exams they're used in the admissions process, but they are used to predict how well a student will perform in the professional school or graduate school curriculum, right? So it's not, you know, when we think of aptitude, it's, well, this is what, you know, this is how good you're going to be. Now, that's not what these exams are. These exams are seeing how will a student perform in our curriculum, right? So we look at these scores, and those scores tell an admissions team how the student will be able to perform in the curriculum. But at the same time, it is the one part of the application that is standard across all applicants, right? So that's really the value that these exams give to an admissions committee and to a school, is that everybody's being evaluated against the same standard. And that's where the term standardized exam comes from, right? Everybody is being held accountable to the same level. And the reason why this is important is that you've got applicants that are coming from thousands of different undergraduate institutions. And even if you are in, let's say you have two students who are applying to the same med school and they're both in the same undergraduate institution, they themselves have had different schedules. They've had different professors. They've taken courses at different times. So they haven't been evaluated in the same way, right? They've been evaluated in that time and place. That's where the GPA comes into play. Then the MCAT rolls along, or the DAT rolls along, or the PCAT rolls along and says, okay, everyone's taking or being measured against the same exam. Now we're able to truly see how you compare against everyone, right? From other schools, from, you know, I mean, even from your own school, but from other, you know, other classes that they've taken. So that's how these are used, and why they continue to be an important part of the admissions process. And that's the key word, is they're a part of the admissions process. It's not the end all, right? No one's going to ever be admitted purely based on an exam score. But at the same time, they're a very important part of the admissions process. In fact, we do a survey of medical school admissions officers, and year after year, when we ask the question, what's the number one most important factor? The MCAT score comes back. And it's not because it's the only factor, it's just because it drives so many of the conversations and decisions that they're making across the board along the way, because of its nature to be able to predict success moving forward. So.
Perfect. Thank you. And thank you for taking the time to explain that, because it really is hard to judge yourself and judge your performance, and, you know that you are, as an applicant, you are comprised of multiple facets in your application, and that the test is just part of that whole package. So thank you for explaining that. So, you guys are our premier test prep partner. Are there any resources that our HPW attendees can get from Kaplan for free? Can you give us a little bit of something here?
Absolutely. There's a lot. So that's like the softball easy question. So yeah, no, I love it. We've got a lot of free resources available. So kind of walk you through the types of free resources, and then we'll have some links available for you to be able to actually download the resources.
Perfect.
So number one, remember I said important to kind of see where you are as far as your level is concerned. We've got free practice tests available. So for each of these exams, we have a free practice test available that I encourage everybody to take, and to see, how you're going to do on this exam. I would say take that a little bit ahead of when you're planning on actually starting your preparation, so that you can kind of get an assessment of where your strengths and weaknesses are, and kind of give you the jump start on things. In addition to that, we have tons of and it varies ever so slightly for each of the different exams because all the exams are a little bit different. So we have different resources depending on the exam. So I won't go through all of them right now, but we can find them on the website. But we have various free resources, including study guides and study plans. So if you're planning on preparing for this exam, but you don't necessarily want to take a full course, and you've got the Kaplan books, for instance, there's a 3-month study plan, a 6-month study plan, a 1-month study plan, a 2-month study plan. So there's those available. We have some question practice resources that are available. And then we've got a ton of articles. So remember, just now I mentioned this fact about the admissions survey, the admissions officer survey. We've got tons of articles that cover all sorts of things from, interviews to what to do with your undergraduate classes. It's literally, there are hundreds of them on our website that are totally free and available to students. So I would encourage you to use that. Essentially, every single one of our courses for each test has a free resources tab, and on that you can find all sorts of free resources that are out there. So use them early, and use them to your benefit as you go through.
And I'm going to say this, that when you're watching this, if you go to the description of this video, you'll see all of those links, because we'll make sure that those are all posted so that everybody can get access to those. So Petros, I want to say thank you. This has really been informative, insightful. Can you give a final piece of advice or just a final thought, something that you want students to take away with them as we're bringing this interview to a close?
Yeah, so I think the couple things come to mind. Number one, as far as these exams go, don't be intimidated by them, right? They are really an opportunity for you to put your best foot forward, as opposed to thinking of them as, oh no, this exam that I now have to take. So that's kind of advice number one. Advice number two, coupled with that, is that these exams are totally preparable. There's nothing that says you cannot prepare for these exams. The information that is available for these exams is all out there, right? It's all available. And there are resources like the ones I shared with you that, of course, you can go further and decide to take a course or whatever it may be. Like, there's plenty of ways to get ready for these exams, even if you fall in the category, which a lot of people fall into, of, well, I just don't think I'm a good test taker. Like, that's okay too. Like, it's a totally trainable skill, and a skill that, does take, which is kind of advice number three, it's a skill that's trainable, but it's a skill that takes time to develop. So don't put things off, is where I'm going with this. It's very easy to think, oh, I can cram for this exam, or I can, get it done in a month. These things take time. And the students that I've seen through the years that have been most successful are the ones that started early enough, not too early, because you don't want to start so early that you are burning yourself out, but started early enough that they gave themselves the opportunity to make the mistakes, which is totally fine. That's why you're doing the practice, and to grow from those mistakes, and gave themselves the time to be able to actually reflect upon those opportunities and see the growth, and then get the reinforcement, get the practice in, and then be able to execute on the day of the exam itself. So I think those three. And be confident. Exactly. Be confident.
That's right. You've got this. Exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with us today. This has been amazing, and I hope everybody watching has been able to take away, a couple of things or a free resource, but really ultimately knowing that you've got this, that this is something that you can handle. And if Kaplan can answer any questions for you, we encourage you to be in touch, or be in touch with Health Professions Week, so that we can put you in touch with the folks at Kaplan, because they really are excellent at this, and we want to make sure that everybody has that as an opportunity. So I just want to say thank you one last time, and I hope you're all having a great Health Professions Week.